Hi everyone, I'm Geoff Hall, the host of Around Town, and today we're traveling to Route 40 into the studio at Westfordcat with someone I consider a friend of mine, Andrew, Sylvia. Andrew, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for being on.
And Andrew, in my experience, and I've gotten to know you over the past several years, because I've seen you around town in just about every location I've ever gone. When there's an event, you were there, formerly with Westfordcat, correct?
That's correct.
But you've just started your own enterprise, or how do we want to say it?
It's called the Westford Template. When I was thinking of the name, I was trying to think, what's something that's kind of Westfordy? And one of the first things I thought it was the Knights Templar. So I was thinking, okay, Knights Templar plus a template's kind of a newsy sounding thing. It's a blank slate. I thought it was original. It sounded professional. It sounded local.
It seemed to fit.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, and I certainly want to talk about your excursion into your own enterprise here, but who is Andrew Sylvia?
Well, I was born in Nashua. I've lived around here all my life. Although, believe it or not, until I got this job, I had no idea where Westford was. I'd probably driven through.
And you were from Nashua? You were brought up in Nashua?
I grew up in Merrimack, so just a little bit up the road.
Yep.
I still remember. Funny story. December 31st, 1999. I was working that night at the movie theater in Tingsboro. So just down the road. I mean, I've been around here forever, but I never really got to know Westford until I came on board with Patch 3 years ago, and it's been a great experience. That's why I wanted to come back. It's a great town.
Well, if you were traveling from Westford northward to Merrimack, I know where Nashua, I know where Merrimack is, but if you talked about some of the surrounding towns, I wouldn't have an awful lot of knowledge about those either. And you know, having been in the legislature, I traveled around the state, and it's funny because when I would say to people I'm from Westford, they go, "Whereabouts is Westford?"
Oh yeah.
And so you have to say.
When I first heard of it, I was like, "Wait a minute, is that like Worcester?" And it's like, no, no, it's right next door.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I've probably gone through on Route 3 1,000 times before then, but it's such a part of my life now. It's the first time I remember the first story I had was during the road race, and I was trying to find my way around. But now it's like it's second nature. It's driving around the roads. It's funny how you get used to it.
How long have you been associated? You started with Westfordcat when?
That was in May of 2011.
Okay, 2011.
And most people don't realize it, but my first story for them. Well, I started freelancing with Patch in November 2010, and my first Westford story was actually in Chelmsford. A month later, there was a wrestling tournament, and there was some gray ghosts there. I got some video of that.
Okay, yeah, that's the annual holiday tournament. As a matter of fact. Okay, so Andrew, you as you said, you were born and brought up in Merrimack, New Hampshire. We were talking before the show about some of your background and some of the odd jobs you've had and some of the not so odd jobs. Talk a little bit about your experience, life's experience.
Oh, I've had a bunch of jobs over the years. Before being a journalist, I graduated from Keene State College with a degree in journalism in 2004. I've done a lot of things. I was a knife salesman at one point. I was a vendor for the National Pride as a kid. What else have I done?
Vendor for the National Pride, the baseball team.
The baseball team, yeah, in their first year back in the day. I worked in radio for a little while.
What did you do in radio?
I was a board operator. I did that in college too for a little while. And for anyone out there who doesn't know what that is, they're the ones who take the calls and switch everything. So we did that for a few years, not as a full-time job, just on the side. And I've written for a couple newspapers here and there before I came to Patch.
Okay.
And one thing that I guess we have in common, I actually ran for the state legislature in New Hampshire a few times.
Amongst 400 others.
Yeah, it's a little different up there. I think I didn't win because I'm supposed to be a journalist. I'm too honest to be a politician.
Well, we'll let that one slide. Well, you know, that's I know you're interested. You said you would with the White Hen Pantry. You would.
Oh
yeah.
There
and.
That was a funny story. I was an employee of that place for 30 minutes. They were hiring somebody to put in the beers and the milk and the soda and stuff in the cooler. Mm-hmm. And the woman there trained me, and she said she'd call me back for hours and whatnot. And then I wait a week, and I called them and said, "Oh, what's going on?" And they said, "Oh, her boyfriend died in a motorcycle accident. I'm sorry, we're dealing with some things now." And I felt horrible after that. It's like, yeah. I can't do this part-time job when this person died. So.
But you know, when you talk about your life's experience, you know, and you got out of college in 2004, just 10 years ago, but all of those things make you kind of a better rounded person.
I hope so.
And you know, so you can go in and speak with someone, not just as quote a journalist per se, but someone who's done some other things in life. Now, you talked about newspapers. Newspapers per se seem to be a dying industry.
They've been saying that for decades. So
yeah.
I think it's more that it's a transforming industry.
Yeah. Well, I just got done reading a book, Ted Williams' book, called The Kid. Ben Bradley wrote it. And the reason I say that is because back in the 40s and the 50s, there were 8 newspapers in Boston.
Wow.
Think about that. You know, Lowell Sun had a morning edition and an evening edition. A lot of these other newspapers had morning and evening editions. Of course, in the age of the internet and all of that, we've seen the last 10 or 15 years, I guess journalism has changed in that sense.
Absolutely. One thing that media analysts talk about a lot is convergence. Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, newspapers and television and radio were completely separate. Now they're all the same thing. They're all merging into the internet. And hopefully, having a website, I can be a little bit ahead of the game there, because I can do video, I can do print. And 10 years from now, the skills that journalists will need are completely different than the ones they'll need today. I mean, I was at a conference in Boston a few months ago, and they were talking about how journalists today need to learn how to code. They need to know SQL and GIS.
And that means nothing to me. SQL and GIS.
Yeah, SQL for folks at home. It's that's software that looks up things in databases.
Okay.
We heard from a guy at the Boston Globe who used that to study vacancies on state boards, and he found there was like thousands of empty spots on state boards, and apparently the state got rid of a bunch of boards after his report.
No,
and he
okay.
was able to find that thanks to SQL. He just put a computer program and he found it out. And GIS, that's geographic information systems. That's basically we have a great Chris Couto here in Westford is the GIS analyst in town. Mm-hmm. GIS is maps that use databases.
Yeah. Okay.
Like for example, like if you wanted to take a map and like with the for example recently here in town with the marijuana dispensary thing, the people on that board said, okay, we want to have certain criteria where we can put things, and they just plug that into the computer and it makes a map out of it using all that information.
Amazing, isn't it?
I know. I actually I was before I majored in journalism. I was studying to be a geography major.
Oh.
So I was.
I had a minor in geography, as a matter of fact. Something that it's interesting. When I started teaching, geography kind of got pushed to the side, and it's coming back more than. I remember when I was taking courses, as a matter of fact, and I took geography of Africa, the late 60s, and those countries were changing
Yeah.
by the week. Andrew, when we talked about, we were saying the newspaper, this idea of the Westford patch and your Westford template, it's kind of a new concept in news, you could say.
Yeah, I'm aiming to be hyper local. Everything Westford all the time. I think that's something you can find national things at other places, but there's very few places you can find Westford news. So hopefully, with my experience, I can help plug some gaps.
Okay, well, that's a good point. Someone has something that says, "Geez, I got something going on." Well, we'll say the Historical Society, for example, is running a speaking engagement with someone who's coming in and going to talk about apple orchards. You would print a story on that then?
I would love to.
Yeah. Okay. So how do people get in touch with you?
Well, the best way right now is just you can email me. It's andrewsylvia@westfordtemplate.com.
Okay.
And all my contact information is also on our website, www.westfordtemplate.com. We're still kind of growing at this point, so the site's going to be adapting. We can also go to our Facebook page. All the information is on there too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But as I said, this is kind of a new concept in news media. Am I correct? I mean, going to the internet, seeing things like the Westford template. These ideas are, I mean, you wouldn't have found them 20 years ago.
Not 20 years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay, 5 or 10 years ago.
It's getting, it's becoming more established. I think fairly soon we're going to see things stabilize, I hope. Just take, for example, music. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but back in the 90s, early 2000s, everybody was using Napster and taking songs and everything. Now you got iTunes. You just get 99 cents for a song, and people don't use that stuff. It takes time for new technologies to become accepted and become monetized. I think we're getting there as an industry. I think it'll come soon, hopefully.
Well, I'm from the dark ages, and I say that somewhat lightly. I started in cable TV, and we talked a little bit about that before the show. About 20 years ago was my first excursion at the cable, and I started a show called Legislative Update at the time, which I ran for my tenure in office. But as I look around this studio here, boy, has the equipment changed.
Oh, yeah.
Has the means of doing things changed a great deal from its inception 20 years ago. So I imagine in your line of work, you've seen some major changes in the last 15 or 20 years. Well, 10 years.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm still a whippersnapper compared to you. Yeah, it's definitely different compared to when I started. It's not. I guess the changes haven't been as significant as what you've seen, but like I was a little shocked when I went to that conference. You have to learn new things every day in this job, and you got to keep on growing. I'm sure 10 years from now it'll be completely different. We'll have new technologies we have to deal with. What's
your biggest challenge?
Just right now finding time to do everything.
Okay.
It's interesting in this position now compared to before. I have more things to deal with, like on the sales side. I need to try to sell advertisements, and I'm trying to learn all the technical stuff. But it's been a great challenge so far. It's great to be back with everybody.
I was going to say, all of a sudden you weren't around town anymore. Say what happened to Andrew. You said the biggest challenge. You've been in Westford. What do you find about Westford? It's going to be similar in a certain sense to Merrimack, where you grew up, though. I mean, the size of the town, what goes on, how the community is run.
It's a little smaller, but it's very similar. I think that's part of why I love it. It's very similar, but it's everyone's so friendly. Even my competitors, quote unquote, are really friendly. Sam Allen at the Lowell Sun and Lindsay at the Westford Eagle and Joyce, they do such a great job, and they're so nice. Everybody in this town is so amazingly nice and so amazingly good at what they do. It's a pleasure being here. I hope I can stay here. This is such a great place to be.
Yeah. Okay. In your 5 years, what have you found? What was probably your most exciting
Oh, that's a tough one. I
I'm
don't,
often
we would need another hour or so just to talk about all of them. I
Yeah.
think if I had to look over, I probably had 3,000 or 4,000 stories I did.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, there was man, what we could go over. There was that time. There was the gun scare at Neshoba
Mm-hmm.
TAC, and there was oh God.
How does someone, say, in a case like that, how did you know when to go to something like that? Do you have a police radio?
Yeah, I listen to it online a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get updates by email, and it's just and a lot of times people in the community let you know too,
Mm-hmm.
because they try to help out.
Yeah.
It's
I was just going to say, so you need to develop relationships with people to make sure that you do stay on top of news
oh,
stories.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, yeah. So that your ability to get around town and go to all of these events, you've made those types of contacts over the years. Then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure not as many contacts as you.
Well, I'm not sure. You find when you're out of office, Andrew, as I've been for going on 6 years now, 7 years actually, that yeah, some of your old contacts, but I drive in the parade every year. For the Apple Blossom Parade. And what made me think of that is I was driving down Main Street this year, and I'm saying, geez, I don't recognize a lot of these people. And I said to Jim Massero after, I said, Jim, I didn't. He says, oh no, he says, I recognized most of them. I was shaking hands, and I'm
Yeah.
saying that's how some of the faces change in a short period of time.
Yeah, it's
True, you know. So yeah, I've made some contacts, and I probably have a few more than you, and I can direct you.
I'd be happy to have them.
Why is it, Andrew? Say you in the newspaper business, but you get away from that.
I still think I'm in it, it's just a different form of it. I still consider myself a print journalist.
Yeah.
I was just looking for a job. Basically, it's a newspaper, but it's an online newspaper.
Yeah.
For the most part. So.
But you've got to be a little more concise with your stories. Am I correct? For example, if there's a story and there's 12 paragraphs to a story, you don't do that with.
Oh no, I think it's almost exactly the opposite in a way. Because one thing, another piece of jargon in newspapers, they talk about column inches. They say an editor will say to you, "I want 20 inches." So an inch usually is about 30 or 40 words. It's like it's 1 inch on a column on the sheet. So if you went too far over that, they'd be upset because they didn't have enough space. On the internet, you have as much space as you want.
Okay.
The concision there isn't due to space, but as much as people's attention spans. But that's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the key there. I think it's more.
When you say people's attention spans, you've got to get something that grabs them then, though,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. One thing I've learned and I've heard is with the videos these days, you want to be 2 minutes or under in terms of pieces. So I know broadcasts, sometimes they go 4 or 5 minutes still. But at least that's what I've been told on the internet. If you go over 2 minutes, people attention spans dramatically drop off. So I understand what you're saying. You got to hook them.
Yeah, I was going to say, though, Andrew, you graduated in 2004 with a journalist degree. Did you come out of this with certain ideals, and then get out into the business and find out, whoa? I mean, for example, I went into politics, I guess, with some ideals, and once I got involved in government, I learned the reality of certain things at the same time. Often said, what you read in the textbook isn't always the way government functions.
Yeah.
Journalism, I mean, has there anything that shocked you?
In terms of the industry, or
in the industry, or changes over the last 10 years?
It'd be hard to put a finger on that. Like I said, I was initially a geography major, and I just wrote so many articles of the school newspaper before I knew it. I was halfway to a journalism degree. It's most of the time I just stumbled upon it. I try to keep my head down as much as I can and just get the stuff out there. That's when I'm happiest. Just doing my job.
Yeah.
It kind of gets depressing sometimes when you think about other things going on that are outside of control, like what happened with the Telegram and Gazette in Worcester. That was a shame.
Oh yeah, it's the 20% layoff or something like that. Just recently, now that they've been bought out. Well, that's once again, as I said, when they say newspapers are changing, and we had 8 newspapers, and you see what happened with the Telegram and Telegraph in Worcester. What are we going to see 20 years from now?
I honestly don't know. One thing I can tell you, though, is a lot of my colleagues with Patch that also left earlier this year across the country have started up their own online newspapers like I have. Here in Massachusetts, the editor in Watertown and the editor in Jamaica Plain have started their own online sites. Bill Gilman, the editor in Tewksbury for a long time, he just started up a week or 2 ago in late May. I've talked to people in California and Georgia and Michigan, all across the country. People who work for Patch are still in their communities. I think that's one of the great things about what Patch was. It helped foster these connections like I have with Westford.
You know, it's interesting. You say local news. Being with the Historical Society, part of what I've done over the last several years is do research on certain subjects. And a good friend of mine and I went out and were researching the history of the Westford Little League. And so we needed to go back to the early 50s, late 40s, and the early 50s.
Oh, and you had the ceremony last year.
Yeah, well, that was for Bobby Wall, the founder. But we had done some things before that. And the point is, looking at those old newspapers, as I said, for example, when you picked up a copy of the Lowell Sun, we'll say from 1952, and if you were looking at Westford, it said Westford, Graniteville, Forge Village, Nabnasset, and there were stories under each of those. So it seemed to be plugged into local news much more than what you'd find today. There'll be a story on Westford here and a story on Westford there, but there was always, as I said, much more focus on what was going on. For example, I was in a school play in the 5th grade, and I remember going through and finding the announcement of the school play at the sergeant's school, listing who was doing what in that play, and giving the names of all the 5th grade students. And I'm saying, my gosh, all of these things were done because it's local. Can you see, and they've gotten away from that, okay, for obvious reasons. They just don't have, for whatever, the time and the number of reporters and things like that. Can you see your news, the Westford template picking up where people, where the newspapers like that have fallen off?
I would love to do that. I think that's our niche.
Yeah.
Basically providing news at a neighborhood level, if possible.
I guess that's the point I'm getting.
That's
a neighborhood thing.
That's the key, because a lot of times I think a lot of publications have gone away from that, due in large part to social media. I mean, if you're the producer of that play, do you want to wait for someone to do it, or you just want to do it on your own? And a lot of times it's you can't get somebody to do it, but it's hard to get enough of a network to get people to hear about it. So it's kind of a catch-22. Hopefully I can help grow people's social networks and also get the word out through my own.
I think that part of what they did that back then, Andrew, is for example, my mom for a while wrote for the newspaper, and she must have had the Graniteville section of the newspaper for the Lowell Sun at the time. I remember her asking me, and if you went back in some of the early Lowell Sun articles in 62 or 63, you'd see my name as writing for the sports.
Oh,
I would
wow.
go because she knew I went to the football game, so she had me write the article. So I had a little delving into the journalism.
It's fun, isn't it?
I guess I wasn't honest enough to stay there, so I went into politics. But anyways, can you see, say for example, would you go out to a neighbor and say, hey, you're from Nabnasset, could you feed me news from Nabnasset or Graniteville or Forge Village?
I think that's something I'm going to have to look at, just in terms of reaching out to people again. I made a lot of contacts with Patch, but it's a different model now. I think I'm going to have to figure out new ways of getting things and reestablishing myself. Oh, that's why I'm here.
You know, the town has changed a great deal too. I know that if you went back 50, 60 years in town, and in my research with the Historical Society, we found, for example, Graniteville and Forge, and then Mass had their own little villages per se, with the neighborhood schools and
they got the village district still. The historical.
yeah, they still have the village districts, but it is more. It is not the villages per se anymore.
Yeah.
If you lived in Forge Village in the 40s, if you talk to someone like Mickey Crocker, or I grew up in the 50s in Graniteville, everything you needed was right there. Your store.
I remember when during the Woydowitz funeral, I talked to some people, and I was taking pictures and I asked for their name, and they said that they were from Forge Village, and don't you dare say I'm from Westford. I'm from Forge Village.
That's right. Right. There's great pride in that idea, but you know that seems to have been lost over the years too. I mean, you talk about the old timers. Yeah.
It's a different world now.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, Westford over the past few decades has grown so much. There's people from out of town who don't fully know the history. So I think that's a big part of that.
I knew it had changed when I told someone, I forget what function I was at, but I had said to someone, "Oh, I grew up in town," and he looked and he goes, a couple of his friends, "Hey, come here. There's one of them over here." I said, "Have I become the minority as a townie?" But what do you think? When I graduated from high school back in 1966, the town had maybe 7,000 people in it at the time, 6,500, 7,000, and you know, we're at 22 now, so it's 3 times the number. Howard Road is now 300 houses down there, and it was just an old farmhouse. So yeah, things have changed. Andrew, we got about another minute left. What do you want to tell people?
Oh, just if you have any news, please come to our website, www.westfordtemplate.com. Please feel free to email me, andrewsylvia@westfordtemplate.com, and we need your support to survive. If you want to advertise with us or donate, there's more information on the site on how to do that.
And if you're looking, I mean, if you're looking for a true local news site, as you say, and I think that's one thing people crave is local news, then this is probably the wave of the future, Westford Template. Someday you could be, well, I don't know, like the Taylors were with the Globe. You could own your own baseball team like they bought the Red Sox.
I hope so.
Yeah.
you could do the games for me.
Yeah, you say you've had your experience with the Nashua Pride, so you do have some association. Andrew, you're a good friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on, and good luck in this venture.
No problem.
I think this is something Westford needs. And thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you around town.